First of all, my apologies that I will do my intervention in English until the Brexit is, I think it's possible to do so. Afterwards, I'm not sure anymore. Nevertheless, I promise you that next time I will do it in German because my new son-in-law is German, so I need now to, Florian is from Neuburg an der Donau, and everybody said, yeah, he's working for Audi. No, I'm saying, no, not for Audi. He's working in Brussels. Dear friends, I had prepared a very beautiful speech of nearly 15 minutes, ending with a beautiful quote of Hans-Dietrich Genscher, saying that there is in fact no other future for us than Europe, because there is no other future than Europe. But I will not going to do that. I will immediately intervene in the debate that I participated in, and I have to tell you, I was very much in agreement with Werner Hoyer. You see that Werner Hoyer was a former president of the European Liberals and Democrats. He still feels like that. He still feels like that. Because he is right, and certainly he can say it far more easily than somebody from another country, when he's saying, in fact, that since 1990, Germany has not longer taken up the historical role in building up the European Union as it was before 1999. Since the reunification of Germany, Werner, since the reunification of Germany, and especially the two big parties, the CDU and the SPD, thought, okay, it's over now. We are the biggest country in population, in economic wealth. It's not necessary to go further into a building up of the European Union. Why the founding fathers, why Hans-Dietrich Genscher, why Helmut Kohl, why Theodor Heuss, where Konrad Adenauer thought from day one, and von Brantano thought from day one, that the future of the European Union is a federal union that is capable to stand up in the world order of today. And I don't know why people are fearing the word federalism always, because federalism, is the opposite of a European superstate. Because federalism, you are federalist, you know it. Germany is a federal state. I'm always saying, why you are fair from a federal state, while you see that the most successful country in the world, that is the USA, with the biggest GDP, is a federal state, with separate constitutions there, and with enormous differences. In one state there is death penalty, in another there is no death penalty, to give only one example. And the most, in fact, performing state and biggest economic wealth inside the European Union is Germany, is also a federal state. So it has not to be a stupid idea to say, why not on the European level should we do the same thing? That is a federal union, and not the union as we have today, because the union as we have today is not the union. It is a confederation of nation states still based on the unanimity rule. And it is the unanimity rule who makes that we are always acting too little, too late in Europe, because that's the problem, the unanimity rule. And it is this unanimity rule that makes, for example, a number of things. In foreign policy, and Alexander sits here, so he knows very well, he has followed the foreign policy of the European Union. I hope you'll still do it, Alexander, for years. Their unanimity, and never we can do something serious. What we can do is, in the Khashoggi case, for example, weak condemnation by the 28 ministers of finance, where what we needed to do was an export ban of weapons against Saudi Arabia, immediately taken by the European Union. Why not can we do it? Because of the unanimity rule. And the same is happening in mostly all, even in the migration crisis, that's the problem. The European Council, the member states, are not capable to have an agreement on the change of Dublin, the European Border and Coast Guard. In my opinion, the migration crisis in Europe is not the fact that more than 1 million people came to a continent of 500 million of people. That's not the problem. The problem was the lack of European instruments, the lack of European policies. That's the migration crisis in Europe. And the migration crisis in Europe is then, so we don't have a European border and coast guard, so people are obliged to turn into the arms, to fall into the arms of criminal gangs and human traffickers. We don't have a real European asylum system. It's still the old broken Dublin system, so that means it is Italy and Spain and Greece who are responsible for it. We don't have a real economic, legal migration system, a sort of a blue card. We have a blue card, but the blue card is in top of the 28 national work permits that we have. And Germany is, in fact, the only country who is using it. So also there is not even unanimity rule on migration. But nevertheless, we cannot have an agreement because the Council thinks that they have to decide by unanimity. And I can continue the number of examples. We need to get rid of such a system, of a confederation, a loose confederation. And we need to build a real federal union in which we understand that the real sovereignty today in the world of today is not on the national level, but is on the European level. And for once, it has always been an opinion in Germany. For once, we are lucky because we have now a French president who is also of that opinion. That happened never in the past. In the past, it was very clear. A French president said, I love Europe if France is like, Europe is like France. That was mostly his opinion. And that was enough. We have now a French president who was elected on the idea, he said that, it was the beginning of his campaign, that European sovereignty is more important than French sovereignty. Normally, if you say that in France as a candidate for the French presidency, you're disqualified from day one. It's not even necessary to participate in this election. And this time, no. In the speech to the Sorbonne, that was really the way forward. So what we expect now, and we cannot expect that from the CDU, don't think about it. I waited already 20 years for it, and it never came. We cannot expect that for the SPD. They are in a survival struggle, so that's not their main point for the moment. It is the FDP, the party of Hans-Dietrich Genscher, who has to give the answer now and the vision for the European Union for the future. It's your task. It's your task to do it. Don't wait for the others. Because what is happening in Europe is very clear. It is what we have seen, and I've said it, Hans, yesterday in the Congress. What we have seen is, in fact, the end of the old two-party system in Europe. That is what we are seeing. In fact, I have to tell you, the Germans are the last in the row. That's the reality. In the Benelux and in the Nordic countries, we were always small parties, and now there are liberal prime ministers. If 20 years ago you have said in Belgium, or for example in the Netherlands, there should be a liberal prime minister, everybody should have said, hey, you are crazy or what? Today it's the case, also in Denmark, in Finland. And so we have no longer this two-party system, conservatives, socialists, conservatives, and at the end nobody sees the difference anymore. And the same is happening now in France, I spoke, but also, for example, in Spain. In the past, it was Partido Popular, PSOE, Partido Popular, always the same. Now it's Ciudadanos, who is, in some of the opinion polls, even the biggest party. And in fact, the same is happening in Italy. The problem only in Italy is that they went towards nationalist and mainly to the Five Stars movement, a populist movement, but also there, the problem is the same. They are saying Berlusconi or Renzi, Renzi or Berlusconi. What's the difference? And that is happening in all the member states. The crisis of the European Union is not the crisis of the European idea. In the Eurobarometer, in the European survey, 2/3 of the Europeans are in favor of Europe. There is nobody doubting about the European project. No, it's the crisis of the two-party system that we are living through, of conservatives and socialists who are always thinking that with little tiny steps we can create a European Union that is viable and efficient. And that is the mistake not to make. We need an overhaul, a reform of the European Union, and not the little tiny steps as we have done in the past far too much. And that means a number of things. I said already the end of the unanimity rule. Also an overhaul of the European Commission. European Commission 28. We have not even enough competences on the European level to give portfolios to the 28. The initial idea of von Brentano, a German, who in 1953 has written on paper, approved by a number of member states. The first constitution was a small European government, a government of 12 to 15. And we have to get rid of what I call this Europe à la carte. I don't like Europe à la carte. Europe à la carte, it's like a menu card. You come in a restaurant, you say, well, I like this, I don't like that. Europe is the same. You come in, you're not obliged to participate in all policies. It's like in America, if that same system should exist in America, everybody should say, well, they are crazy, these Americans. But it's in Europe that it exists. For example, that you don't need to participate in the single currency, that you don't need to participate in Schengen, that you don't need to participate in the European patent, that is not necessary to be full member of Europol. That's Europe. It's like in America, you should have a system, first of all, where the 50 governors are everything deciding by unanimity, and secondly, a system in which states could say, well, I don't participate in the US. California saying, look, the dollar, very nice currency, but I will continue with the Spanish peseta. And that is more or less, yeah, it was applicable, Luis, until the midst of the 19th century, your currency in old currency, in California. Or for example, Texas saying, look, the FBI, the American Border and Coast Guard, nice organizations, but we will not participate. We will do it on ourselves. That's Europe for the moment. We get to get rid of that system of opt-ins and opt-outs. And I think that the whole Brexit discussion of today, Brexit is an opportunity to do this overhaul of the European Union, because we all know that the Brits were the champions of the opt-ins and the opt-outs and the earmarks and the rebates and the exceptions. I asked always myself why they had, in fact, to do a referendum to say that they go out of the European Union. You were already half of the time out of the European Union. The last decade in policy. That doesn't mean that I find it a good thing that they go out, because I think it's always a failure when a big country like the UK is leaving. And the lesson to take from that is not, okay, it's finished. No, it's to reform this European Union, to make it a federal union the fastest as possible, because I'm pretty sure that we are not capable to overcome the next financial crisis with the institutions that we have. We have already that problem with the migration crisis I described to you, but the same, and Louis is right, it's the same on the next financial crisis. I don't know what will happen. If somebody knows that it will happen, they tell us as fast as possible and when it will happen. But if it is happening, Louis, we are not prepared with the institutions we have. It's sorry that I have to say, it's not with the European Central Bank at the one hand, and a stability pact that is never applied, by the way. I'm always saying the Stability and Growth Pact in the European Union is like a joke. In the north of Europe, they are saying, fortunately it exists, unfortunately we don't apply it. And in the south of the European Union, they are saying, unfortunately it exists, fortunately we don't apply it. That's more or less the Stability and Growth Pact. But you cannot govern a currency with a pact, with a contract. I'm always saying that maybe a state can exist without a currency, without its own currency, using the currency of another state. That exists, Louis, in a number, using the dollar, for example, or even the euro. But the opposite is not true. There cannot be a sound single currency without a state authority behind. And that is what we need to build up. And I know that there are differences of point of view on what it should be, and certainly that idea of a new budget again, a new transfer union, but the transfer union is a consequence of the bad policies we have developed in the past. In the beginning of the European Union, there was nobody talked about the transfer union. The name net recipients and net tax payers, that countries were net payers, didn't exist. It was the European Union from day one was built on one issue, own resources, that were customs duties, VAT, valued added tax, that was the income of the union. And nobody talked about a transfer union and net recipients and net payers. That came because exactly the British asked for a rebate. And Mrs. Thatcher wanted, I want my money back. We give her that rebate to the British member. And what was needed was naturally to change the whole system of funding of the European Union. Not from direct funding to a funding by national contributions by member states. Otherwise you cannot give a rebate to a country. That's the logical consequence of it. And the consequence of that was that since 1998 we do something what we did never before. We have an official list of every country, Alexander, where we put them in a net recipient column or in the net payers column. And that is, in my opinion, when we start to do so, the end of a real union. Because then, in such a system, every time there are battles, dispute, tensions. So I think the solution for the governance of the Eurozone and for the whole European Union, Louis, in the future, is essentially to change the way we fund the European Union so that we can rid of national contributions. I propose that the national contributions go back to the member states, and as a good liberal, that we lower the taxes of the people with it. That is maybe a good solution for. And that we have then a direct funding. Why not a carbon tax on heavy polluting industry? What is the problem with it? Or, for example, why not a charge on the 5 big American tech companies, Google, Amazon, Apple, and so on, who are using our data, mainly our European data, to gain their profits. And a small and medium company here in Germany, he has not that advantage. He has to pay his taxes. But the big monopolistic companies in Silicon Valley don't need to do that. That could be a good funding for a Euro budget. And that is a Euro budget funding that is not creating a transfer between the North and the South, neither between the East and the West. And then a last point, it will be, and I ask the FDP to be in the lead of that, a Europe that is working and defending our values. Because there is a real threat in the European Union. Salvini in Italy, Kaczynski in Poland, Orban, not to tell in Hungary. Can you imagine today that there, in a few weeks' time, on the 1st of December, a free university is obliged to close its doors because Mr. Orban doesn't like the founder of that university? That remembers me the darkest times in European history, such a situation. And we are... And we have to react against this. We liberals, at least, cannot accept such people or such countries or such leadership that thinks, and that is the idea of Mr. Orban, illiberalism he calls it. That means if you have the majority in your parliament, you can do whatever you want, even end the rule of law. That's the, well, liberalism is not that. And a rule of law is not that. In a liberal society, in a liberal democratic society, it's not because you have the majority that you can do what you want. There are rules, there are human rights, there is the independence of the judiciary, there is the freedom of speech, there's the freedom of education, and there are principles that, for a liberal, even not a majority can end in a country, in whatever country of the European Union. And that's our fight. We have to be in the front run in this fight against these illiberal tendencies, this autocratism from the Salvinis, the Orbans, and the Kaczynskis of this world. And I'm pretty sure that we will not be alone. Like Louis explained, and certainly Hans will do it in a few moments, we have, friends that want to fight with us to achieve this, to create a movement in the center of the political landscape of Europe that is liberal, that is centrist, that is radical, that is democratic, that is progressive, with one aim, that is to, in fact, fight for Europe's soil. And in that, I can tell you one thing, Germany, and especially the FDP, has to have a leading role, and I hope that you will pick up this leading role. Thank you.